It's the trial that changed South Africa. In the fall of 1963, Nelson Mandela and 10 other leading opponents of South Africa's apartheid regime faced trial for their lives. The charges, in what is often called the Rivonia Trial for the Johannesburg suburb that was the location of the hideout for a militant wing of the African National Congress, were sabotage and conspiracy, and there was little doubt that Mandela and most of the other defendants would be found guilty. Desperate times had dictated desperate measures. Standing in the dock at the Palace of Justice in Pretoria, Mandela announced that the ideal of a democratic and free society is one for which I am prepared to die. The Rivonia trial was a trial that took place in apartheid-era South Africa between October 9, 1963 and June 12, 1964, after a group of anti-apartheid activists were arrested on Liliesleaf Farm in Rivonia. The farm had been the secret location for meetings of uMkhonto we Sizwe, MK, the newly formed armed wing of the African National Congress. The trial took place in Pretoria at the Palace of Justice and the Old Synagogue and led to the imprisonment of Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Ahmed Kathrada, Denis Goldberg, Raymond Mhlaba, Elias Motsoaledi, and Mlangeni. Many were convicted of sabotage and sentenced to life. The Rivonia trial took its name from Rivonia, a suburb of Johannesburg. Various people and groups, including the African National Congress and Communist Party of South Africa, had been using Liliesleaf Farm, owned by Arthur Goldreich, as a hideout. Nelson Mandela moved onto the farm in October 1961 and evaded security police while masquerading as a gardener and cook called David Motsoaledi. He was arrested on August 5, 1962 without the farm having been discovered. On July 11, 1963, the farm was raided by the South African police. Lionel Bernstein, Denis Goldberg, Arthur Goldreich, Bob Hepple, Abdul Hajusset, Ahmed Kathrada, Govan Mbeki, Raymond Mhlaba, Mlangeni, Mlangeni, Elias Motsoaledi, Walter Sisulu, and Harold Wolpe were all arrested by. They were detained under the General Law Amendment Act No. 37 of 1963, which allowed for detention of up to 90 days. Other key leaders such as Oliver Tambo, Moses Kotane, Joe Slovo, Moses Mabhida, Stephen Dlamini, Joe Modise, Alfred Enzo, Wilton Mkwei, and others were not at the farm at the time of the arrests. The arrest of the MK High Command members resulted in them being sentenced to life imprisonment, 2 others being arrested and 2 others going into exile. Arrested were Lionel Bernstein, architect and member of the South African Communist Party, SACP. Denis Goldberg, a Cape Town engineer and leader of the Congress of Democrats. Arthur Goldreich. Bob Hepple. Abdul Hajusset. James Kantor, brother-in-law of Harold Wolpe. Ahmed Kathrada. Nelson Mandela. Govan Mbeki. Raymond Mhlaba. Mlangeni. Mlangeni. Elias Motsoaledi, trade union and ANC member. Walter Sisulu. Harold Wolpe, prominent attorney and activist. Goldberg, Bernstein, Wolpe, Kantor, and Goldreich were Jewish South Africans. Hepple was of English descent on his father's side and Dutch and Jewish on his mother's. Jusset, Kathrada, Mhlaba were Indian Muslims. Mandela, Mbeki, and Mhlaba were Xhosa people. Motsoaledi and Mlangeni were Sotos and Sisulu was Xhosa. He had an English father and a Xhosa mother. The leaders who were prosecuted in the Rivonia trial also included Mandela, who was in Pretoria local prison, where he was serving a 5-year sentence for inciting workers to strike. Trade unions were illegal for black workers, and leaving the country illegally. The government took advantage of legal provisions allowing for accused persons to be held for 90 days without trial, and the defendants were held incommunicado. Withstanding beatings and torture, Goldreich, Jusset, Mhlaba and Wolpe escaped from jail on August 11. Their escape infuriated the prosecutors and police, who considered Goldreich to be the arch-conspirator. The chief prosecutor was Percy Yutar, Deputy Attorney General of the Transvaal. The presiding judge was Quartus de Wet, Judge President of the Transvaal. The first trial indictment document listed 11 names as the accused. The trial began on the October 6, 1963 till June 12, 1964. Counsel for the accused successfully challenged the legal sufficiency of the document, with the result that Justice DeWitt quashed it. Prior to dismissal of the first indictment, the state withdrew all charges against Bob Hepple. Hepple subsequently fled the country, without testifying, and stated that he never had any intention of testifying. The second indictment thus only listed 10 out of the original 11 names, referring to them as accused 1 through 10. Nelson Mandela, accused number 1. Walter Sisulu, accused number 2. Denis Goldberg, accused number 3. Govan Mbeki, accused number 4. Ahmed Kathrada, accused number 5. Lionel Bernstein, accused number 6. Raymond Mhlaba, accused number 7. James Kantor, accused number 8. Elias Motsoaledi, accused number 9. Andrew Mlangeni, accused number 10, he was the last to testify on trial. Bob Hepple, accused number 11, he never testified. Mlangeni, who died on July 21, 2020, was the last surviving Rivonia defendant following the death of Goldberg on April 29 same year. Nat Levy was attorney of record in Pretoria for Mandela and the other accused, with the exception of Kantor, who had no connection with the other defendants and was seemingly charged only as a proxy for his brother-in-law and law partner, Harold Wolpe. The defense team comprised Joel Joff, who was the instructing attorney, Bram Fischer, Vernon Berrange, Arthur Shaskalson, and George Bezos. Hilda Bernstein, wife of Rusty Bernstein, approached Joff after being rebuffed by other lawyers who claimed to be too busy or afraid to act for her husband. Joff was subsequently also approached by Albertina Sisulu, wife of Walter Sisulu, Annie Goldberg, mother of Denis Goldberg, and Winnie Mandela, wife of Nelson Mandela. Joff agreed to act as attorney for all of the accused except Kantor, who would require separate counsel, and Bob Hepple. Joff initially secured the services of advocates Arthur Shaskalson and George Bezos, then persuaded Bram Fischer to act as lead counsel. Vernon Berrange was also later recruited to join the team of advocates. The defense lineup for the majority of the accused was Joel Joff, instructing attorney; Bram Fischer, advocate, lead counsel; Vernon Berrange, advocate; George Bezos, advocate; Arthur Shaskalson, advocate; Harold Hansen, advocate. The accused all agreed that Kantor's defense could share nothing in common with the rest of the accused. He thus arranged a separate defense team. Dennis Cunny, later counsel in the Bram Fischer trial, was involved at the beginning of the trial defending Kantor. After state prosecutor Utar accused him of having been on the mailing list of the Communist Party, Cunny was debriefed and forced to withdraw. While Harold Hansen primarily represented Kantor, he was also invited to deliver the plea for mitigation for the other 9 accused. The defense lineup for Kantor was John Coker, advocate; Harold Hansen, advocate; George Lowen, advocate; H.C. Nicholas, advocate; Harry Swartz, advocate. Their charges were recruiting persons for training in the preparation and use of explosives and in guerrilla warfare for the purpose of violent revolution and committing acts of sabotage, conspiring to commit the aforementioned acts and to aid foreign military units when they invaded the Republic, acting in these ways to further the objectives of communism, soliciting and receiving money for these purposes from sympathizers in Uganda, Algeria, Ethiopia, Liberia, Nigeria, Tunisia, and elsewhere. Production requirements for munitions for a 6-month period were sufficient, the prosecutor Percy Utar said in his opening address, to blow up a city the size of Johannesburg. Kantor was discharged at the end of the prosecution's case. The trial was condemned by the United Nations Security Council and nations around the world, leading to international sanctions against the South African government in some cases. Some escapes. Arthur Goldreich, Abdul Hajusset, Musa Mulya, and Harold Wolpe escaped from the Fort prison in Johannesburg while on remand after bribing a prison guard. After hiding in various safe houses for 2 months, Goldreich and Wolpe escaped to Swaziland dressed as priests with the aid of Manny Brown, who later helped to set up tour operator Africa Hinterland as a cover to deliver weapons to the ANC. From Swaziland, Vernon Berrange was to charter a plane to take them on to Lobetse, a small town in southeastern Botswana. 30 Jusset and Mulya escaped into exile in India. Wolpe's escape saw his brother-in-law James Kantor, who had been serving as a member of the defense team, arrested and charged with the same crimes as Mandela and his co-accused. Harry Swartz, a close friend and a politician, acted as his defense. After being dealt with aggressively by the prosecutor Percy Yotar, who sought to portray him as a vital cog of MK, Kantor was discharged by Judge Quartus de Wet, who ruled that he had no case to answer. Following his release, Kantor fled the country. He died of a heart attack in 1974. At the beginning of the defense's proceedings, Nelson Mandela gave a 3-hour speech from the defendant's dock, in which he explained and defended the ANC's key political positions. He justified the movement's decision, in view of the increasing restrictions on permitted political activity on the part of non-white Africans, to go beyond its earlier use of constitutional methods and Gandhian nonviolent opposition to the state, embracing a campaign of sabotage against property, designed to minimize risks of injury and death, while also starting to train a military wing for possible future use. He also discussed in some detail the relationship between the ANC and the SACP, explaining that, while the two shared a commitment to action against the apartheid system, he was wedded to a model of constitutional democracy for South Africa. He singled out the British political model for particular praise, and also supported a market economy rather than a communist economic model. The speech is considered one of the founding moments of South African democracy. Mandela's closing words have been much quoted. His statement that he was prepared to die for the cause was strongly resisted by his lawyers, who feared it might itself provoke a death sentence. In a concession to their concerns, Mandela inserted the words "if needs be." Speaking in the dock of the court on April 20, 1964, he said, "During my lifetime I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Although the prosecution did not formally request the death penalty, close observers of the trial considered such a sentence to be implicit in the prosecutor's presentation of his case. Opposition to the death penalty included both public campaigns internationally, the United Nations, and the defense's arguments within the courtroom. Harold Hansen was called upon to argue in mitigation. He compared the African struggle for rights to the earlier Afrikaners' struggle, citing precedents for temperate sentencing, even in cases of treason. On June 12, 1964, 8 defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment. Lionel Bernstein was acquitted. Unsubstantiated evidence suggests that Hansen, in a private hearing with de Wet, persuaded him to commute the death sentence for high treason to life imprisonment. There was no surprise in the fact that Mandela, Sisulu, Mbeki, Motsoaledi, Mlangeni, and Goldberg were found guilty on all 4 counts. The defense had hoped that Mhlaba, Kathrada, and Bernstein might escape conviction because of the skimpiness of evidence that they were parties to the conspiracy, although undoubtedly they could be prosecuted on other charges. But Mhlaba too was found guilty on all counts, and Kathrada, on 1 charge of conspiracy. Bernstein, however, was found not guilty. He was rearrested, released on bail, and placed under house arrest. Later he fled the country. Denis Goldberg went to Pretoria Central Prison instead of Robben Island, at that time the only security wing for white political prisoners in South Africa, where he served 22 years. Their releases. In 1985, February 28, Denis Goldberg was released from the custody of the National Party government after spending 22 years in Pretoria Central Prison White Prison. He was released by order of President P.W. Botha. In 1987, November 5, Govan Mbeki was released from the custody of the National Party government after serving 24 years in the Robben Island prison. He was released by order of President P.W. Botha. In 1989, October 15, Ahmed Kathrada, Raymond Mhlaba, Andrew Mlangeni, Elias Motsoaledi and Walter Sisulu were released from the custody of the National Party government after spending 26 years each in Robben Island and Pollsmoor prison, and their release which also included Wilton Kwei after spending 25 years for Little Rivonia Trial, Oscar Mbeki after spending more than 6 years, and the co-founder and former leader of the Pan-Africanist Congress Denis Goldberg after he also spent 27 years in prison. They were released by order of President F.W. de Klerk. In 1990, February 11, Nelson Mandela was released after spending 27 years and 8 months in prison as a result of the Rivonia Trial, 18 years of which were spent on Robben Island. He was released by order of President F.W. de Klerk. The Rivonia Trial was recorded on dictabelts, a now obsolete audio recording format. Nearly 250 hours of the trial proceedings were recorded on 591 dictabelts, kept by the National Archives and Records Service of South Africa, NARSA. In 2001, 7 of the dictabelts were digitized by the British Library. This included Nelson Mandela's "I am prepared to die" statement from the dock. In 2007, documents relating to the criminal court case No. 253/1963, State vs. N. Mandela and others, were recommended for inclusion in the Memory of the World Register in 2007. In 2012, NARSA approached the French Institute of South Africa, IFAS, and the French National Audiovisual Institute, INA, to start a process of digitization and restoration of the rest of the Rivonia Trial sound archive. French engineer, historian, and inventor, Henri Camus, took a little over 15 months to edit and digitize 230 hours of recording using his own invention, the archaeophone. The digitized recordings were officially returned to South Africa, in 2018, as part of Nelson Mandela's centenary, a one-day international colloquium listening to the Rivonia Trial, courts, archives and liberation movements was organized to commemorate, discussing issues relating to the act of collecting, mapping, digitizing and restoring archives and raising ethical questions that, in turn, become historical questions. Some films about Rivonia Trial. The 1966 film entitled Der Rivonia Prozess, directed by Jürgen Goslar with Simon Sabella as Nelson Mandela. The 2017 film entitled Bram Fischer, aka An Act of Defiance, directed by Jean van de Velde, covers the story of the trial, focusing on the involvement of the lead counsel for the defense, Bram Fischer. In 2017, the 2 remaining survivors of the Rivonia Trial, Denis Goldberg and Andrew Mlangeni, appeared in a documentary film entitled Life is Wonderful, directed by Sir Nicholas Stadelen, which tells the story of the trial. The title reflects Goldberg's words to his mother at the end of the trial on hearing that he and his comrades had been spared the death sentence. A 2018 French documentary entitled The State Against Mandela and the Others, written by journalist Nicolas Champos and directed by Gilles Porte, covers the story using actual audio recordings of the trial along with charcoal-style animation. It includes excerpts of interviews with some of the accused and others involved directly or indirectly in the trial. Thank you for watching this video.